on, and this has been on my mind quite a bit, so I thought it might be fun to just kind of riff on it for a little bit, see if this resonates with you, and offer some ideas that maybe will help you if you find yourself in this situation that happens to so many of us, even seasoned professionals. And that question is, how do you practice when you just really don't feel like it? Or if you're like most people, maybe you've been having some trouble getting the practice habit going, and then the challenge is once so many days pass, it really feels like rolling a boulder uphill to like get the motivation to practice. Even though this is a wonderful instrument, we know it'll be good for us, but we all have those moments where we just don't feel like it. We just don't feel like it. We'd rather chill, we'd rather do something easier, maybe watch Netflix, whatever. So this often leads to the end of people's piano journeys, especially adult students, because that not feeling like practicing just goes day after day after day until they decide, you know what, I'm not going to spend the money on lessons anymore until I figure out how to make the time to practice. And then that never happens, and then they just never get back to it. So I just wanted to share some ideas, starting with my own struggles with this. I struggled with this whole feeling like practicing thing, and I went to music school as like a music major. This is my career, so it really does impact all of us. And especially in sort of in my master's degree, especially in my doctorate, it's almost a miracle I even graduated because I struggled with this so much. And let's admit it, learning the piano is hard. We have to, before we get to sounding awesome, we have to do a lot of tedious things. And so it wasn't until I started a music school, I started studying more productivity, entrepreneurship, which is a lot of overlap between entrepreneurship, productivity, and learning to play a musical instrument. And it wasn't until I started learning more about that I started making these connections of, oh, that's why I procrastinated so much, or this is why I struggle practicing the piano, or why I struggled. It's not as much of an issue for me now, although I struggle with keeping up with other things, of course, as we all do. So I just wanted to share a few ideas. If even one of these little nuggets helps you to sort of overcome that desire to just not practice when you don't feel like it, I will have done my job in this little spontaneous live chat. So I think the first thing to remember is sort of why we procrastinate. And there's this really life-changing concept. If you take one thing away for why you procrastinate with anything, let it be this. It's this concept, this psychological concept that affects all of us called temporal discounting. Temporal discounting. And it basically means that the further away a goal is, the less you're going to care about it. And we will easily trade working towards that faraway goal for an instant gratification. So rather than putting time in every day to work out, rather than putting time every day to practice piano, we'd rather take a small dopamine hit, even if it's something as simple as looking at social media like right now. So I think every day it's just really important to think about this. Again, the brain's condition, we're wired to, if there's a goal that's far away, we're going to naturally not care about that as much as sort of an instant gratification now that's much, much, much smaller than that big goal ahead. So if you just sort of remember this could propel you to action, because if you want to procrastinate, that's basically the main reason why. So that's thing number one, temporal discounting. It's something that affects all of us, and that's for good things and bad things. So we'll discount the reward of being able to sound awesome on the piano. We'll also discount the pain of having gone our whole lives not being able to succeed at piano, because we'll think, well, there's always tomorrow, and we know how that goes. Now, so let's talk about some strategies to deal with this. First, I got this out of a book called Relentless by Tim Grover. Tim Grover was Michael Jordan's trainer. Fantastic book. If you read one non-music book that'll help you with piano, let it be that one, Relentless by Tim Grover. And in the foreword, there's sort of an overarching principle that he really professes. He has his 13 principles of what he believes makes a relentless individual, but the sort of overarching idea with all this is to stop thinking. And this is one strategy I'm finding myself using more and more when it comes to practicing the piano, when it comes to doing things that I just really don't feel like doing, is to just don't think and just do it. So if you get one thing after this live stream, if you're catching this little bit, if you turn off this YouTube video and just go straight to practicing the piano without thinking about anything, just get your butt to the seat, get playing something, then I will have done my job on this little live stream riff. So what happens with a lot of us, especially if days have gone by when we haven't practiced, all kinds of emotions sit in. It might be like, oh, I don't feel like practicing, or it could be maybe a little bit of shame, like, oh, I've let so many days go by, this isn't going to be fun, whatever. If you can bring yourself to take those thoughts and just shove them aside and just get to the piano, that's a win. So consider that a win. So that's thing number one, don't think. Thing number two is see practicing the piano as building a habit. And most people don't really understand how habits work, why it's so hard to create good habits, why it's so hard to break bad habits. And the best book you can get on that topic is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Totally changed how I think about habit building. And he talks about a couple strategies that might help you in getting to the piano when you really don't feel like it. One is just understanding how a habit works. So when it comes to a habit, there are three parts to it. There's the trigger, there's the activity itself, and then there's the reward at the end. So trigger, the activity, the action, and the reward. So what often happens, and I would love to, chime in the chat if you're here live or in the comments with the replay if you can relate to this, where sometimes the thought process with practicing or not practicing piano can feed into a different, not as good habit. So a trigger for, say, watching Netflix could be you thought about doing piano, but then that makes you think about going to watch Netflix. So that's sort of the trigger. The action is watching Netflix, which is our bad habit that we want to break. Not that there's anything wrong with Netflix, but when we're doing that more than the things that we should, that's not good either. And then the reward, of course, is that you feel good having binge watched the whole first season of Squid Game or something like that. So trigger, action, reward. If you can sort of frame your piano practice habits around that cycle, you can get this momentum going, especially if it's after a long break. And the best way to establish a new habit is something that James Clear calls habit stacking. So that's if you can just make a commitment to take a habit that you already have, and we all have habits, whether it's intentional or not. I think the sort of ultimate habit is waking up in the morning. So like if you wake up in the morning, that's a habit that's unavoidable for every human on earth. So what you can do is take one of these existing habits, even if it's, even coming home from work, it's not a habit maybe in the traditional sense, but it is a consistent part of your day. Habit stacking is taking the thing that you want to add, in this case we're talking about piano, and stacking that, putting up against your existing habits. So you could say, all right, I'm going to practice piano as soon as I get home from work. When I get home from work, straight to the piano. Habit stacking. Or it could be before dinner, after dinner. Something that you do every day, just put this right next to it. So that's one tip, habit stacking. The second is this, what I call the 2-minute rule. It's also, I guess I can't really call it that because that's also a James Clear Atomic Habits tip. And that's where on the busiest days, just do 2 minutes. Just force yourself to do 2 minutes. Anybody can do 2 minutes. Some people really struggle even with this idea of getting the 2 minutes in, but what happens, if you try it for a week, you'll be amazed at the effects here. If you just get 2 minutes in every day for, say, a week, 2 minutes, it might not seem like you're putting a lot of time in piano, but you're actually doing something quite miraculous in your brain. What you're doing is you're developing the habit of starting. The habit of starting. If you're just tuning in, if this is one thing that you take away, the habit of starting, the 2-minute rule. Because even, let's face it, even the busiest of days, anybody can get 2 minutes at the piano. I know it might feel like it's so busy that we can't get it in, but I call that perceived time starvation, where we technically have the time, we're just so busy that it feels like we don't. So getting the 2 minutes in and getting that in on a daily basis. And then what happens, it's a really cool effect here, is you have that habit of starting, you're sitting down at the piano, you're getting some time in each day, and what happens is that habit, the 2-minute habit, eventually becomes sort of a gateway to longer practice sessions, especially once it starts feeling good. And then so 2-minute rule, get it in every day, habit of starting, and then also just reflecting on what feels good about practicing. I think what happens is we sort of form these associations with when we sit at the piano, it's going to be boring, I have an uphill battle, especially if you've gone many days without practicing. So what can be helpful is before you practice, before you start a practice session, even if it's just 2 minutes, set a goal with what you want to accomplish. And you can accomplish something in even just a couple minutes. Think about what will feel good about that. And then after your practice session, sort of reflect on your goal and again, really sort of think about what feels good about that, because we like to do things that feel good, right? And so part of this habit loop, the trigger, the activity, the reward bit, we have to make sure that we're actually taking time to think about what feels good about our practice session so that we'll want to do it again the next day. And part of that is assessing our goals, because if you accomplish your goal, you feel good, you feel accomplished, and that's something that we want to do again when we come back the next day. So again, just thinking about what feels good, setting goals, having a laser focused practice session, getting rid of all distractions, even if only for 2 minutes, and then reflecting on what feels good afterwards. And it really helps to write this down. As most of you could probably relate to, our thoughts kind of swim around in this endless storm of stuff. So when you actually take even 1 minute and just write it down, type it, whatever, it can sort of help codify your thoughts and really help you internalize all of that. And then finally, what can really help you get to the piano when you really don't feel like it is to set some goals, join a community. If you're just happening upon this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber. We're always trying to provide all kinds of tips, tutorials, not only on how to play the piano, but also all the stuff that happens in here with motivation and keeping going despite all odds. But joining a community, finding a friend who also plays the piano, having that support group, that community can be so helpful when you're struggling with that. Not only because it can be motivation, because when you see your friends, your piano friends, you want to be able to give a good report. Of course, there's accountability. But then you also have people that you can talk to. It's really helpful to have another person to be like, hey, I'm really struggling with getting motivated practicing. Do you go through this? What do you do? And then we have this sort of beautiful synergy there with community. So if you're not already part of our YouTube channel community, I'd invite you to please go ahead and subscribe. We would love to have you. And I think that's about it for my riff today. So if you get one thing out of this, I would say just don't think. 2 minutes can be all it takes to make a huge difference. Get to the piano, do it for 7 days. Plan, reflect, think about what feels good about your practice, and then you'll find that over time, your mindset around sitting at the piano, enjoying the process, having that space just for you and your instrument, it can become more special than you ever thought possible. All right, thank you for joining. I'll see you on the next one.